Okay, in this quick video, we're going to do a quick response to feminists, Muslim feminists. I'm talking about the ones with hijab. The topic is polygamy. Very sensitive topic, of course. Why? Because the Prophet said it would be. The Prophet said one of the struggles for a woman to have her jihad is to control her jealousy. For men, the Prophet ﷺ said, one of the struggles for him is jihad, fighting in the path of Allah. And that's why you'll find a lot of Muslim sisters complaining, how come brothers aren't going and fighting jihad and helping the poor Palestinians and whatever? Well, the Prophet said, a time will come where the love of the dunya and the fear of death will overwhelm them, and that is their greatest jihad, to overcome that, to perform that action. And similarly, he said that about women. In a different context, he said, a time, obviously, will come when the jealousy will be so strong, and this is natural to have, that they'll openly even reject polygamy. And so in order to do that, they need to justify it, because they always have to give some sort of a rational explanation for why it doesn't make sense. Or, well, what they would say is, they'd say it's not for our modern. They will argue that was something of the past. And you need to be really pious to be like that. And, and only people in the past, like the Prophet Muhammad, see, he was so pious. And that's why he had more than one wife, because he was pious and he can do it. Therefore, it's legitimate for him, but not for anyone else. No, seriously, this is their argument. And so they would say things like, men are different these days. Men can never be like the Prophet. They can never be as pious as him. Therefore, this verse of the Quran, it's now become outdated for them. It's something for the past. It's not for the modern day, because in the modern day, you'll rarely find a pious man. Therefore, this verse doesn't apply anymore. Now, I find this really peculiar, and I'll tell you why. The same feminists, reformists, women empowerment movements, the ones that are against polygamy, the same women would generally always judge Muslim men and say, why can't you be like the Prophet? Why don't you strive to be like the Prophet? Stop coming home and wasting so much time on the TV and getting your wife to do the dishes and the laundry and cooking the meal for you. Be like the Prophet. The Prophet himself used to sew his own clothes, used to do the dishes, he used to build the fire pit to cook this food. He used to sew his clothes, he used to bath and fight jihad and work and do all of the things that men do. And he used to come home and help his wife. So why don't you be like the Prophet? But here's the irony. When we say, well, we want to be like the Prophet had multiple wives, so I want to have multiple wives. Oh no, you can't, but because that was the Prophet. You can never reach his piety. Right? You can't be the Prophet. That's not you. Okay? Don't even compare yourself with the Prophet. But then the same women empowerment, feminist, hijabi movements are always comparing men and judging men and saying, well, we should be like the Prophet. We have to encourage men to get up off their butts, backsides, more appropriately, to be like the prophet and do something. Help with the laundry, help with the dishes, help with the cooking, help with the maintenance in the house. Don't just sit there. Don't just come from work and just sit there. Get up and do something. That's what the prophet did. Okay, sure. Well, the prophet also got married to a second wife. Oh, no, we can't go there now. No, you're not good enough to be the prophet. Well, hang on. Okay, well, why do I have to come home from work and cook and clean and do all that sort of stuff? I mean, you said I can't be like the prophet. I can't be pious enough to do all these other things. Do you see where I'm getting here? Do you see the double standards? When it comes to them benefiting, right, from their husbands, they're always encouraging us to be like the prophet. But soon as something displeases her, soon as something doesn't go in favor of her, oh, no, you can't be like the prophet. Don't even think about going there. You're not the prophet. Now, when they get trapped, they would basically try and come up with another smarty-party response. So they'd say things like, but shouldn't a woman help keep her husband away from hellfire? There is no way a man can do justice with all his wives, the kind that is required of him. Heaven knows being fair to one wife is a goal out of reach these days. So basically the argument here is that there are huge consequences of taking multiple wives, because the more wives you have, the stronger the test is and the harder the requirements are, and you could end up in hell because of this. And so this is their argument to try and stop brothers getting into polygamy. Another trap. They're setting up another emotional trap, right? But this can be easily refuted. So the response basically is, you could say something like this, but shouldn't a woman help keep her husband away from hellfire? Didn't the prophet say most people in heaven are from the poor? Why does she keep insisting that they get wealthy? Shouldn't she rather insist in living a poor life with him? Doesn't she want him to go to heaven? Notice how the logic backfired. So the point here is, just because something has a huge responsibility doesn't mean that we should not go for that or try and hit that target. If you believe internally that you can fulfill this premise, why not? Because although there's a big responsibility, there's also a massive reward, right? Even the prophet said that raising 3 daughters, they'll be a shield for you on the day of judgment. Imagine having multiple girls from multiple women. Imagine how many shields you'll have. Imagine how many rewards you'll have. And so the argument backfires here, because I pointed out that women never complain and say, why are we so rich? Right? They'd always want the riches. They always want their husbands to be wealthy, even though it's a high risk to be wealthy, because the Prophet ﷺ said that majority of the people in heaven are of the poor. So if you're insisting your husband to get all this wealth, then I thought you cared about his salvation. I thought you cared about his heaven. Oh, now the standard changes. So when it comes to wealth, you're like, go for it, halas, go for it, all the wealth, halas. It doesn't matter if, there's high consequences of hellfire. Halas, go for it. But when it comes to polygamy, I need to think about his heaven now. I need to think about his salvation. I need to think about hellfire, right? Oh man, the double standards.